What if the greatest misunderstanding about a nutritionally balanced diet is not that it fails, but that we expect it to do something it was never designed to accomplish? For decades, the phrase "eat a balanced diet" has been presented as the gold standard of nutritional advice. It appears in medical guidelines, public health campaigns, and nearly every conversation about long-term health. The assumption is simple and reassuring. If a diet is balanced, it must also be optimal. Yet this assumption quietly collapses under closer scientific inspection. A balanced diet is not flawed, but it is limited, and those limits matter. Here is the distinction that must be made immediately, especially when discussing disadvantages. A nutritionally balanced diet is designed to prevent deficiency, not to maximize performance. This single sentence explains why balance can be adequate while still being a disadvantage. Public nutrition frameworks were developed to reduce widespread malnutrition, not to optimize cognition, longevity, metabolic flexibility, or individual resilience. When a tool is used outside its design purpose, disappointment is inevitable, not because the tool failed, but because expectations were misplaced. Before discussing outcomes, it is essential to establish functional boundaries, because scientific accuracy depends as much on what a concept does not do as on what it does. A nutritionally balanced diet is not designed to do the following. A balanced diet is not a diagnostic tool. It does not identify nutrient insufficiencies, metabolic dysfunctions, inflammatory states, or hormonal imbalances. It assumes an average physiology that may not exist in the individual consuming it. A balanced diet is not a therapeutic intervention. It is not formulated to reverse disease, correct insulin resistance, address autoimmune conditions, or repair organ-specific dysfunction. Clinical nutrition requires targeted protocols, not general balance. A balanced diet is not designed for individual optimization. It does not account for genetic variation, microbiome differences, lifestyle stressors, training load, age-related changes, or recovery demands. Balance serves populations, not precision. Finally, a balanced diet does not adapt rapidly to physiological change. The human body changes across seasons, stress levels, illness, aging, and activity. A static dietary framework cannot dynamically adjust to those shifts. Without this paragraph, any discussion of disadvantages becomes vague. With it, the limitations are no longer implied, they are defined. Now the first cognitive anchor can be stated clearly. The first limitation of a balanced diet is that it is built for adequacy, not optimization. Adequacy prevents collapse. Optimization enhances capacity. These are not the same goal. This distinction explains why many people eat well yet experience persistent fatigue, plateaued performance, slow recovery, or gradual metabolic decline. The diet is doing exactly what it was designed to do, keeping deficiency at bay, but not what people assume it should do, maximize function. The disadvantage, then, is not failure. The disadvantage is misalignment between design purpose and expectation. Once this is understood, the conversation can move beyond slogans and into precision, not to reject balance, but to place it correctly within a hierarchy of nutritional goals. and that hierarchy must be understood before deeper limitations can be examined. Once the functional boundaries of a balanced diet are clearly defined, the disadvantages stop being abstract and become operational. The question is no longer whether balance is good or bad, but whether it can keep pace with the realities of a changing human body. This is where the second and third limitations emerge, subtle, cumulative, and often misunderstood. The second limitation, a balanced diet does not adapt to physiological change. The second limitation appears when we examine adaptation. Human physiology is not static. It responds continuously to stress, sleep, illness, training load, trauma, hormonal shifts, and environmental pressure. Metabolic needs today are not identical to metabolic needs 6 months from now or even 6 weeks from now. Yet a balanced diet is, by definition, structurally static. It distributes macronutrients and micronutrients according to general ratios intended to apply broadly across populations. This is not a design flaw, it is a design choice. Public nutrition guidelines are built to be stable, repeatable, and safe for the widest possible audience. They are not built to adjust dynamically to acute inflammation, recovery demands, neurological stress, or metabolic inflexibility. As a result, when physiology changes faster than dietary input, imbalance emerges, not because nutrients are absent, but because timing, proportion, and prioritization no longer match need. Here is the second cognitive anchor. The second limitation of a balanced diet is that it cannot respond in real time to physiological stress. For example, periods of high cognitive demand may require different amino acid availability than periods of rest. Recovery from illness may require temporarily elevated micronutrient intake. Intense physical training alters glucose utilization, electrolyte balance, and protein turnover. A static, balanced framework does not recognize these transitions. It assumes continuity where none exists. This mismatch produces a common experience. People feel off without being deficient. Blood tests may appear normal, calorie intake adequate, food quality reasonable, yet performance, mood, and recovery decline. The problem is not absence, it is misalignment. Balance provides coverage, not responsiveness. Over time, this lack of responsiveness accumulates cost. Small mismatches repeated daily create adaptive friction. The body compensates at first, then strains, then reorganizes around limitation rather than capacity. None of this triggers alarms because the diet remains technically healthy. The disadvantage remains hidden until it becomes chronic. The third limitation: balance becomes less effective with age. The third limitation emerges more slowly, but it is the most consequential: aging. A balanced diet is implicitly designed around adult stability. It assumes relatively intact digestion, absorption, hormonal signaling, and cellular repair mechanisms. Aging disrupts all of these. Digestive efficiency declines. Protein synthesis becomes less responsive. Micronutrient absorption changes. Inflammatory signaling increases. Mitochondrial efficiency decreases. Yet the balanced diet framework remains largely unchanged. Here is the third cognitive anchor. The third limitation of a balanced diet is that its effectiveness declines as the body's responsiveness declines. This is a crucial point. A balanced diet does not fail because nutrients disappear. It fails because the body's ability to use those nutrients changes. What once maintained function now merely slows decline. Adequacy becomes maintenance, and maintenance gradually becomes insufficiency. This is why aging individuals often experience a paradox. They eat better than they did when younger, yet feel worse. The issue is not discipline, it is mismatch. Nutritional needs become more specific, not less. Precision becomes more important, not optional. A population-based model cannot resolve individual aging trajectories. Muscle loss, cognitive decline, bone density reduction, and metabolic rigidity do not occur uniformly. They require targeted nutritional strategies, adjustments in protein distribution, micronutrient density, timing, and metabolic support that a balanced diet was never designed to provide. At this stage, the disadvantage becomes unavoidable. Balance delays deficiency, but it does not prevent functional decline. It keeps people within normal ranges while those ranges themselves shift downward. Why these limitations are easy to miss. These disadvantages are rarely labeled clearly because they do not present as immediate failure. There is no dramatic collapse, no obvious deficiency disease, no single symptom to point to. Instead, there is gradual loss of resilience. Recovery takes longer, focus fades faster, energy becomes less predictable. These are not emergencies, they are signals. A balanced diet masks these signals because it maintains baseline adequacy. It creates the illusion of sufficiency while capacity quietly erodes. This is why the disadvantages are often dismissed as normal aging or stress, rather than recognized as structural limitations of the dietary framework itself. At this point, the core argument sharpens. A balanced diet is successful at preventing collapse but insufficient for preserving or expanding capacity. That difference defines the disadvantage. Once adaptation and aging are understood, the discussion can no longer remain general. The question becomes not whether balance is good, but when balance must give way to precision. And that transition, when adequacy stops being enough, is where most nutritional guidance fails to prepare people. Part 3 will address the most dangerous disadvantage: why relying on balance alone can delay recognition of decline until intervention becomes much harder. The most dangerous disadvantage of a nutritionally balanced diet does not announce itself with deficiency symptoms or medical alarms. It appears quietly over time, precisely because balance is effective at preventing obvious failure. This effectiveness becomes the problem. By maintaining adequacy, a balanced diet can delay recognition of functional decline until intervention becomes far more difficult. This is the third and most consequential cognitive anchor. The most dangerous disadvantage of a balanced diet is that it can hide deterioration while preserving the appearance of health. To understand why this matters, we must separate two concepts that are often conflated: health status and functional trajectory. Health status is a snapshot. It tells us whether basic parameters fall within accepted ranges at a given moment. Functional trajectory, by contrast, tells us where the system is headed. A balanced diet is designed to stabilize the snapshot, not to correct the direction of travel. This distinction explains a common and troubling pattern. Individuals following standard nutritional guidance often pass routine screenings, maintain acceptable body weight, and avoid overt disease, yet experience steady erosion of resilience. They tire more easily, recover more slowly, and adapt less effectively to stress. Because no single metric fails dramatically, the decline is normalized. The diet appears to be working until it no longer does. Here is where balance becomes misleading. A balanced diet keeps the system within tolerance. It does not ask whether that tolerance is shrinking. It does not reveal whether the margin for error is narrowing. It does not distinguish between maintaining function and avoiding dysfunction. As long as collapse is postponed, the framework signals success. But postponement is not preservation. This creates a structural blind spot. When nutritional input is not targeted, the body compensates by reallocating internal resources. Short-term compensation feels like stability. Long-term compensation feels like aging. Muscle mass is sacrificed to preserve glucose. Inflammation is tolerated to maintain energy. Cognitive sharpness is traded for stress resilience. These trade-offs are subtle, adaptive, and costly. The balanced diet does not detect these trades because it is not designed to monitor them. Here is the fourth cognitive anchor. A balanced diet maintains averages. It does not protect priorities. Human biology operates on priorities. When resources are limited or misaligned, the body protects survival first, then reproduction, then performance, then longevity. A diet that merely supplies average coverage cannot prevent this hierarchy from asserting itself. Over time, performance and longevity lose ground while survival metrics remain intact. The person appears healthy while capacity declines. This is why decline is often discovered late. By the time blood markers shift or symptoms become undeniable, adaptation has already been exhausted. Intervention becomes corrective rather than preventative. The system is reorganized around limitation. Another layer of risk appears when balance is treated as a permanent solution rather than a baseline. Public nutrition advice is often internalized as a ceiling. If I'm eating a balanced diet, I'm doing everything I can. This belief discourages further inquiry. Signals of decline are attributed to age, workload, or personality rather than nutritional mismatch. The diet becomes unquestionable even when outcomes change. This leads to the fifth cognitive anchor. The disadvantage of balance is not what it lacks, but what it discourages questioning. Balance feels authoritative. It is endorsed by institutions, repeated by professionals, and culturally reinforced. When people follow it faithfully, they assume deviation would be irresponsible. As a result, early opportunities for precision are missed. Adjustments that could restore trajectory are delayed. The cost compounds silently. This is especially problematic in contexts where optimization matters most. Cognitive performance, athletic longevity, metabolic health, and aging with independence. These domains do not fail suddenly, they degrade gradually. Balanced nutrition slows degradation but does not arrest it. Worse, it can normalize it. There is also a psychological dimension to this disadvantage. When people do everything right according to standard advice yet experience decline, confusion follows. Motivation erodes. Agency weakens. The narrative shifts from something needs adjustment to this is just how things are now. The diet, rather than empowering action, inadvertently fosters resignation. None of this implies that balance is harmful. The harm lies in overextension of purpose. A tool designed for adequacy becomes a substitute for precision. A population solution is mistaken for an individual strategy. The resulting gap between expectation and outcome produces frustration rather than clarity. At this point, the argument must be stated without ambiguity. A balanced diet is necessary for baseline health, but it is insufficient for sustaining capacity over time. The disadvantage emerges when insufficiency is mistaken for failure of the body rather than limitation of the framework. This recognition reframes the role of nutrition entirely. Balance becomes a starting point, not a destination. It establishes safety, not excellence. It prevents collapse, not decline. Once this hierarchy is understood, nutritional decisions can evolve beyond slogans and into strategy. The final step, addressed in the conclusion, is not to reject balance, but to reposition it correctly as a foundation upon which adaptation, personalization, and optimization must be built. Only then does the title make sense. The disadvantage of a balanced diet is not that it is wrong, it is that it is mistaken for enough. When the limitations are made explicit, the conclusion becomes clear and unavoidable. A nutritionally balanced diet is not the problem. The problem is where we place it in the hierarchy of nutritional goals. Balance was never designed to optimize performance, preserve peak function, or adapt dynamically to change. It was designed to establish sufficiency, to prevent deficiency, reduce population-level risk, and create a stable baseline for health. When used for that purpose, it succeeds. When asked to do more, it quietly fails, not through collapse, but through gradual erosion of capacity. This is why the concept of disadvantage must be understood correctly. The disadvantage of a balanced diet is not that it causes harm, it is that it creates the illusion of completion. By maintaining adequacy, it can delay recognition of decline, discourage precision, and normalize the slow loss of resilience that accompanies aging, stress, and changing physiology. Once this is understood, the false dilemma disappears. The choice is not between balance and extremism. The real distinction is between baseline coverage and functional optimization. Balance establishes safety. Optimization preserves trajectory. One without the other produces stagnation. From a scientific standpoint, this reframing restores accuracy. It respects what balanced diets can do while clearly defining what they cannot. From a practical standpoint, it restores agency. Decline is no longer dismissed as inevitable, nor is the body blamed for failing to thrive under a framework that was never designed for thriving. The most important takeaway is not dietary prescription, but conceptual clarity. When people understand that balance is a foundation rather than a finish line, they can begin asking better questions. about adaptation, personalization, timing, and changing needs across the lifespan. In that sense, the disadvantage of a balanced diet is also its greatest lesson. Adequacy is not the same as optimization, and once that difference is recognized, nutrition stops being a rule to follow and becomes a system to work with, one that evolves as the body does.